Virginia Jenny Hannon was regarded highly within the tight-knit community of Pembroke, Massachusetts. She was an adored cook at Bryantville Elementary School. Students and teachers recall how she would lovingly sneak an extra cookie or container of juice to those who needed it. A lover of baking, locals remember fondly how she would make cookies and other confectionery delights for the students and local children. When she wasn't working strenuously for the school, she was known to take in and rehabilitate stray animals. Her gentle and generous nature made the uncovering of her stabbed and beaten body all the more horrific. On February 13, 1984, 59-year-old Jenny, as she was known to those closest to her, was declared deceased in her own home, a victim of a brutal stabbing and strangulation at the hands of a then unknown culprit in what would be the first murder in that sleepy town in over a decade. A widower, Jenny had lost her husband in 1971, 13 years prior to her own premature death. She lived by herself in a quaint cottage on West Street, painted a cheerful yellow, which was located about 3 miles from the town center. Each year, Jenny was known to make an annual trip to California to visit her aunt. She always spoke well of her aunt and diligently and joyfully made the trip of over 3,000 miles to visit her. Due to her friendliness, some recall that Jenny was known to be a bit too forthcoming with personal details of her family life and general going-on-abouts. After her aunt passed away, she inherited $380,000, which is equivalent to over $1 million in 2021, taking into account inflation. Due to this windfall, Jenny was finally able to retire, a welcome respite as she suffered from emphysema and became winded when doing tasks that required even a moderate amount of strenuousness. After receiving her inheritance, Jenny deposited the bulk of the money into the bank. But, whether founded or unfounded, whispers that Jenny kept stacks of cash somewhere in her yellow house circulated, and soon the rumor spread like wildfire throughout the small town. On Saturday, February 11th, 1984, one night before her death, Jenny was picked up and brought to the nearby town of Hanson to attend the 5 p.m. Mass at St. Joseph's Church with a friend of hers named Dolly, something she regularly did. As they usually did after the service, the two women drove to the city of Halifax and ate at BR's restaurant. After dinner, Dolly drove Jenny home, and they said goodnight to each other at around 7:30 p.m. After dropping her off and watching Jenny walk into her home, nobody, including Dolly, heard from Jenny for the remainder of the weekend. On Monday, February 13th, at around 11 a.m., Jenny's stepfather's housekeeper, who was dropping in to ask for a spare key with which to access the elderly man's apartment to clean, found the 59-year-old in her own bed with a bedsheet pulled over her face. It was clear upon a visual inspection that her body had undergone a horrendous and brutal beating. Her face bore the marks of repeated battering, and she had been stabbed 6 times around the torso. Some media reports say she had also been stabbed in one of her eyes. There appeared to be an imprint of a shoe mark on her stomach, which led investigators to believe that she had been stomped on or had been kicked. A pair of pantyhose had been utilized to bind her extremities. Her cause of death appeared to be strangulation. Forced entry was visible to investigators. Both Jenny's window and her front door had been broken in order for the killer to gain entry. Her friend recalls Jenny having $100 in her wallet on the night that she went out to dinner, which was later unaccounted for, leading investigators to wonder if the motive for her murder may have been robbery, and that possibly the robber had believed the rumors about the hidden cash from her inheritance from her deceased aunt. While the town was small, no suspects were ever identified in Virginia Hannon's murder. Police canvassed the area and questioned friends, family, and neighbors, but nobody heard anything, and despite the detectives' best efforts, the case went cold and stayed that way for nearly 40 years. Then, in 2020, police received a tip saying that a man from Brockton, A city in Plymouth County, Massachusetts, named Jesse Isleworth, was the culprit in the case which had gone unsolved for so long. The tip was called in one day after Jesse Isleworth passed away in the hospital. The person calling the tip into police said that Isleworth confessed to the murder while on his deathbed in a hospital at the age of 58, just 1 year younger than Jenny when she was brutally taken from the world. Isleworth was 22 at the time he claims he committed the murder. Isleworth, born March 9, 1961, had died February 3, 2020. His obituary described him as intelligent and independent and stated that he liked to help the homeless. Reports claim he worked as a handyman and may have owned his own business at one point. After obtaining a warrant in order to collect a sample that was admissible in a court of law, the police were able to obtain a specimen to test it against the crime scene artifacts, which included DNA collected from the nylon stockings used to bind the victim, the shards of broken glass covered in blood at the crime scene, and the paper towels found on scene that were soaked in blood. The samples pulled were a definitive match to Isleworth, and after 37 years, police were able to close the case of Virginia Hannon. Although police finally have the name of Jenny's killer, they do not know the motive for the gruesome killing, besides the possible financial motivations, as so far investigators see no link between Jenny and her admitted killer. On July 11, 1963, a man fishing in Keene Creek Reservoir near Ashland hooked onto something on his fishing cord. At first, he thought it was a rolled-up blanket. However, after reeling in the blanket, he realized that inside the bag was the body of a toddler. He immediately called the police. The boy was fully clothed and was wearing shoes. He was wrapped in a blanket and a handmade patchwork quilt with 2 iron assayer molds attached to keep it submerged underwater. A coroner determined that the toddler likely suffered from Down syndrome or another genetic abnormality. The boy was estimated to be between 1 and 2 years old. Due to the freezing temperatures of the previous winter, the coroner was not able to determine an exact time of death, but it is estimated that the boy most likely died sometime after October of 1962. The boy's cause of death was unknown, but his death was considered a homicide given the circumstances under which his body was found. The toddler was between 2 foot 8 inches and 3 feet 2 inches tall, and he weighed between 19 to 30 pounds. He had sandy blonde or light brown hair and was wearing a red, long-sleeved shirt with horizontal thin white stripes, gray corduroy pants with an elastic waist and a buckle for size adjustment, ankle socks, and size 3 white shoes known as jumping jacks. The clothes were likely purchased at JCPenney and Norris Shoe Store in Medford. The police compared his footprints to more than 100 recorded footprints of infants born at the local hospital. Dental records at the time were rarely used, but this case changed that as the toddler had unique teeth which could help identify him easily. The police sent letters to neighboring counties describing the boy's characteristics. The police received several tips but still were unable to identify him. The toddler was buried in a grave at Hillcrest Memorial Park in Medford, Oregon, with the gravestone that read, John Doe, name known only to God. The investigators did their best to identify the young boy, but the case would eventually grow cold. Then, in August of 2008, the boy's body was exhumed and a DNA sample was taken. His DNA was entered into the CODIS database in hopes of finding any relatives. However, no matches could be found. In 2010, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children created a composite sketch of the boy using the DNA extracted. In December of 2020, police submitted the boy's DNA to Parabon Nano Labs. The chief genetic genealogist, C.C. Moore, then used the open-source DNA database GEDmatch to find 2 potential siblings. The police interviewed a maternal half-brother in Ohio, who told investigators that he had indeed had a younger sibling born with Down syndrome named Stevie Crawford, born in New Mexico. Stevie was born on October 2nd, 1960, making him just 2 years old when he passed away. He also told investigators that Stevie's mother took him on a trip with her, but that she had returned without Stevie and merely told the family that, quote, "We won't be worrying about Stevie anymore." The half-brother said it was never discussed again. Stevie's mother and stepfather died a few years prior to the revelations, and his father's name is still unknown. It is unclear how Stevie died, but it is believed the boy's disability or lack of medical care could have been the reason for his death. Some close to the case wonder if the mother had something to do with the boy's potentially intentional death. Stevie was reburied in a family plot. The toddler was finally given the name he deserved 58 years later. Carla Walker was a 17-year-old teenager studying at Western Hills High School in Benbrook, Fort Worth. Carla was a popular student and had a boyfriend named Rodney McCoy, a quarterback for Western Hills Cougar football team. Family and friends said they both had a great relationship and never fought with one another. On February 16, 1974, Carla and Rodney went to a Valentine's Day dance at their school. The couple partied with friends at a Taco Bell and later stopped at the Ridula bowling alley to use the restroom. The couple returned to the parking lot and began kissing in Rodney's car, pressed up against the passenger door. Rodney later told the police that an unknown man yanked the car door open and the pair partially fell out of the vehicle. The unknown man then repeatedly hit Rodney on the head until he fell unconscious. Rodney later remembered that he had been pistol whipped after the man had pointed a gun at his head and had pulled the trigger 3 times. Rodney told the police he heard 3 clicks, but nothing came out of the gun. Rodney said he remembered Carla then being taken away by the unknown man as she looked at him and told him, quote, "Rodney, go get Dad, go get my dad," before Rodney fell unconscious. When Rodney regained consciousness, Carla was nowhere to be seen. Rodney then drove to Carla's house with blood running down his face and notified her family. The family immediately called the police. The police searched around the parking lot and found Carla's purse and a magazine from a .22 caliber Ruger pistol. 2 days later, on February 20th, 1974, Carla's body was found in a culvert near Lake Benbrook. An autopsy revealed she had been beaten, sexually assaulted, and strangled to death. Morphine was also found in her system. Police were able to recover DNA from the crime scene, but the technology at the time was not advanced enough to identify a killer. Soon, police were able to match the magazine found at the crime scene to a gun registered to Glenn Samuel McCurley. McCurley was a convicted car thief and lived just 1 mile from the bowling alley. Police learned that McCurley did not have work on the night of Carla's kidnapping and was off the following day. His wife was also out of town at the time. Police interviewed him, but he claimed that someone had stolen his gun a few weeks prior. He said he did not report it missing because he was an ex-convict and did not want to get in trouble. He denied any involvement in Carla's kidnapping and subsequent murder. Over the years, police interviewed several suspects, but none were charged. The case eventually grew cold. In 2019, detectives reopened the case, and DNA found at the crime scene was submitted to the CODIS database, but no matches could be found. Then, in July of 2020, Ortham Labs created a genetic profile of a suspect with the help of DNA found at the crime scene. The DNA profile was entered into GEDmatch, and in September of 2020, police were able to narrow down the search to 3 brothers, who had surnames as McCurley, as a possible match. One of the brothers was Glenn Samuel McCurley, who was interviewed in 1974 as a possible suspect. The police then took a DNA sample from his trash, and it matched the DNA found at the crime scene. McCurley, now 78, was again questioned, but still he denied any involvement. He agreed to give a DNA sample. Soon, McCurley was arrested and charged with Carla's kidnapping and murder after his DNA matched the DNA found at the crime scene. During his interrogation, he said that he had been out drinking on the night of the crime. He said he had parked his car at the parking lot and noticed a girl screaming in her boyfriend's car. He said he decided, quote, to help her out, and was able to free the girl out of the car after a tussle with her boyfriend. He denied raping and strangling Carla. However, he later reportedly confessed to the crime after the investigators asked him, "How did you kill her?" And he answered with, "I guess I choked her." During his trial in August of 2021, the video of his interrogation was presented to the jury, and McCurley changed his plea to guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison, and the case was solved after 47 years.